So Noah, I want to start at the beginning. All right. So from the very beginning, think about when we started this church and what led you to join Exeter Valley Church with your family.
Yeah. So Noel asked, he kind of gave me a heads up on some of these questions, but he said you can't write down the answers. So last night, Jacqueline and I just kind of talked about it, and so kind of our story is we Jacqueline and I got married in 2012, and we moved to Exeter that same year. Jacqueline has horses, and we wanted to live out in the country, and like Jacqueline was reminding me, is like, you're the one who actually wanted to live in Exeter. We looked at houses in Tulare and North Visalia and other places, and I'm not quite sure why I wanted to be in Exeter, but I just did. When my parents first moved here from good old Bakersfield, we lived in Exeter for a short period of time on C Street, and I loved it. I mean, I can remember riding my bike around town, and my mom had like, don't pass railroad tracks, right, over there by 218, because our old church, that was on dangerous ground, and don't go past 65. But as kids, we were able to just venture around. Went to the 99-cent store and Rick and Nachos, for those of you who are old timers and know that place. Like, so I had that like embedded in me from early on. So we moved to Exeter in 2012, and I wanted to be a part of the community of Exeter. And it's really hard when you didn't go to high school in Exeter, and I wasn't working in Exeter. At that time, I was working at the hospital, and we didn't have kids yet. And then even when we did start having kids, we had decided to homeschool them. And so we had struggled in finding that connection, being a part of Exeter. We had gone to a couple churches at that time and didn't feel called. We were kind of, early in our marriage, and both grew up at two different churches, and trying to find what was home for us. So that's kind of what kind of got us started going Exeter. I felt like we had a calling to be here, to have a community here. But God was telling us to wait at that time. Like, I really do feel like now looking back, it was like, it'll come, but wait. Fast forward, we started going to Radiant Church, and they did small groups. And Jacqueline reminded me that the very first small group, Noel had reached out, and I'm sure it was based purely on proximity, that I lived in Exeter and so did Noel. And Jacqueline goes, yeah, don't you remember? You're like, who's this personal trainer inviting me to pack? And I had forgotten about that, but I didn't know Noel. I mean, I knew he'd go up on stage, and I knew who he was, but I didn't know him. And so I said no, and I didn't go with him to his small group. And
the story starts with no.
Yeah, so it started with no, and I went with a small group, but it was with somebody that I felt more comfortable with, and his name was Seth Richmond. And he was, he's a pivotal part of my story as well, but started doing a small group with him. And then I think it was by the second year, Noel reached out again, right? And said, hey, we're doing small groups. Would you like to join? And that's when I started joining Noel's small group. And it was the guy that I had been meeting with, that I was very comfortable with. Our schedules weren't lining up to continue with him. Noel was an early morning pack, which was great. And I started meeting with Noel maybe 5-6 years ago now. And we started doing small groups in that aspect. So that's how, I got to know Noel real well, doing small groups, and through church and different things. And it's not like we didn't know each other, but our relationship started building. And then in 2020, when the world shut down, we started doing home churches with Radiant. We were meeting at different homes, and they were separating them out by region. And so we were meeting at the Enod's house. If you guys know the Enod's, I think that was probably one of the more predominant places that we were meeting on a regular basis. And so maybe back up a little bit. When we had become members at Radiant, the pastor there had said, oh, do you know Noel Peepgrass? And I said, oh, I've been in pack with him. And he said, you know what? He has ambition to plant a church in Exeter, and you're from Exeter. He just kind of said it like he was just thinking about it as he was talking about it. That would be really cool if you were part of Exeter too. And I was like, oh, okay, I don't know, like that was years before any of this. And then, so then, we're meeting at home churches, and Noel's been sharing through small group his story of being called out, of not coaching in the field, but coaching in the church. And I had heard it many times. Like, I've heard Noel's testimony many times. And in 2020, late 2020, 2021, Noel had shared that God was telling him to go. And he had done some vision nights. If any of you guys went to the vision nights at his house. And so Jacqueline and I, like, it wasn't like a question. Like, it wasn't like, oh, I wonder if we'll go to this vision night. It's like, no, we're going to go to the vision night. And we had been praying about it and talking about it, but it was like there was already a peace in our heart. Like, we knew what we were supposed to do. And those of you who know Jacqueline and I well, I'm more of like, I'll give you an answer right now. And Jacqueline is very good about, let's pause and reflect and wait and pray. And she's very wise in that way. And I'm not. And when we went to the vision night, it was the opposite. Like, Noel gives his testimony and this is what I see. I made it a point not to say anything because I needed to go home and pause and reflect and pray more with my wife. And in my heart, I felt like, yeah, we're going to do this. But, that was where I was at. And Jacqueline was like, yeah, we're doing it. And I remember we're going out to the car and she's like, oh no, we're with you guys. We're joining. And I was like, wow, that's if that's not like that for me is very confirmation, right? Like God wanted us to be here. He had put that on Jacqueline's heart, even stronger so than on mine. And so that's how we started coming to Exeter Valley Church.
So Noah started with a no, but we got the yes right away from Jacqueline. Let the record reflect. Yeah. That's how this played out. So, one of the things I remember on our vision nights, one of the things that we would do is, we had 2 nights where we just told our story and invited people, and some of you were there, some of you were not, but, I remember handing out this form, not a form, but it was an article, written by a pastor named Tim Keller, who has planted a lot of churches, and he's based out of New York City, but the article was about why plant churches. And, one of the biggest reasons, or the biggest, one of the most compelling reasons for us to establish a new church is because new churches are just statistically way more effective at reaching the unchurched than an established church. So we actually believe that, planting churches is one of the best ways to reach people and bring people who are outside of the church into a new church. And so this is really, important, right? That Noah said yes. And I think it's really interesting that the story of evangelism starts with a yes, doesn't it? And so, well, we're super glad that you said yes. Noah and Jacqueline have been faithful servants here, just real teammates. One of the things, though, that has come along with their yes has been some challenges. How many of you know that when you say yes to God, it doesn't necessarily get easier, So Noah and Jacqueline have walked right with us when things have gotten hard with different relationships. I think at times you felt like you were right in the middle of some of these things that have been really, really, really hard. And I just wanted to ask, because if you guys remember far enough back in Matthew 10, Jesus sends his disciples out 2 by 2. And he tells them that things are going to be really hard for them as they go on mission. And so this is a fact of being on mission with Jesus, is that things are going to get really hard. And I just wanted maybe your testimony, like when things have gotten really hard, what has been your response and what have you learned about life on mission with God?
Yeah. I would first say, like, I didn't think things were going to get hard. Like, when we started going, I can remember, like, cool, we can stay in Exeter, right? Like, that's 15 minutes extra, right, of being able to not commute. And there was like a lot of like, this will be easier. And it really wasn't. Like, there was a lot of aspects that came with it of questioning from people that I had a lot of respect from. And I don't think, like, I think back like Job and like what friends may have said to him and things of that nature. And I don't think it was like, let me see if I can tear down Noah and Jacqueline this week. It was questions that we had from close friends or people who knew us, and almost like questioning out my qualifications for starting church. And I was like, oh, I'm not starting. Noel's starting. I'm just attending. And when you do start a church and start going in the very early, like, you're just doing things because, like, you're there. And so I do feel like there was hardship that came, and there was questions that came up, and there was trials that just felt unfair at a lot of times. Like just, man, I don't know why this is going on. And Jacqueline was going through the same trials with us, and it was what it really did for me. What, like, your question, what do you do when it gets hard, is like, I remembered like why we were here. Like, we were here because we really felt like God told us to come. Like it was very much like a reminder of, no, this is where we're supposed to be, you know? I can remember my brother moved away during this time frame, and he's like, "You guys should come to Idaho," because that's what my brother did. And it was like, you know what? No, like we're feeling called to this church. Like I can remember him saying, like having that conversation with him, like, "Hey, at this point, we're called to this church. I feel like God's telling us to be here." Not that I would want to go to Idaho because it's snowing there, but it was like I had that really strong piece about like this is what God is telling us to do in our current stage. And so as things got hard, Jacqueline was really good about reminding us, and then I would have to remind her, and we would go back and forth and like this is what we're feeling called to do in that time frame. And it wasn't easy. It wasn't like, well, that's trial's fine because we're called to be here. It was like, oh my gosh, are we doing the right thing? And this is going on, and man, we might lose this relationship or whatever it may be. But there was definitely that peace that came when we would just say, do you feel like you heard God wrong when he said to go, be in Exeter? No, and there was a lot of fruit that came with it. And I would say like, so 2021, we started here. The first year, 2 years was hard in different aspects, but my faith has never been stronger. Like I was in my Bible way deeper. I was having very deep conversations with Noel and with Jake. I mean, shoot, Jake and I would be out in the parking lot for 2 hours past our small groups having these conversations. And you start to like things that my parents did when I was a kid were coming to light. I was in a position where I was kind of in between two people and having a conversation, and like my parents put us through Awanas. My parents were really good about, we were attending church and things of that nature. And these verses that were dug down deep in my life that I hadn't recalled for many years were coming through. And it wasn't like, let me go look it up real fast. It was like God just put it in my mind and brought them to words. And even now, like I couldn't tell you right now, but I would just say like it's so powerful what God's able to do, and the little stepping stones that my parents were faithful in doing with us, and they came to fruit. That was cool. That's like cool to like reflect on and like to have a testimony now on that. And I would say even before this, I don't think I would say I don't have a testimony, and now just in 2 years, like I do have a testimony.
Yeah, it's good. I think there's a promise in Matthew 10 where Jesus says that the Holy Spirit will give you the words to say when you don't know what to say. And so it's cool that that's been part of your story. And also, it reminds me of why I think Jesus's last words were, and don't forget, I'm going to be with you wherever you go. And the reality is that we need him on mission, and I'm so thankful that God doesn't just send us and then leave us, but he's with us. And thanks for sharing that part about, how do you respond when things get hard? Now, what I mentioned earlier, and I kind of joked, but you have invited a lot of people to our church. And I find it's interesting, some of them are family. So that's,
those are easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you've also invited a lot. You also have used your medical practice as an opportunity to share your faith or bring people to church, invite people to church. And I think some of us are sitting here wondering like, well, I'm not a pastor. That's not my job. And I'm not supposed to talk about my faith at church, or I'm not supposed to talk about my faith at work. And some of us live a little bit with that fear, whether we're teachers or we work in the public sphere. So I just wanted to ask, like, how have you seen your practice as a doctor as part of God's call on your life to fulfill the Great Commission?
Yeah, so don't think I would have ever worded it that way. Like I have been very blessed to do something that I love. I love caring for patients. I've seen, HIPAA, I won't tell people who I've seen, but I've seen a lot of you guys in different people.
Actually, we don't want to know about what you've seen these people
so
for.
Noel
So
came
just
and
keep
saw
that
me.
a secret.
He had this rat. No, but it's.
I go to a different doctor now.
But it's been it's just amazing. It's amazing how God works, right? Like I would have never thought that this would be what I was, called to do. Because I've told Noel many times, he calls some to be pastors. I am not one of those, right? And I highlight that word "some" in my Bible. But God has used me in my practice to be able to have conversations with people because they're at their most vulnerable spot. I worked in the ER for many years, and I found like relatively easily, there's an aspect when people go to the ER, and if you've worked in the ER for many years, you'd be like, that's not an emergency. But to those people that are there in that moment, it is an emergency for them. And again, like I just found it to be kind of easy to say a prayer with people. In some aspects, it would be over like something very tragic, like a loss of a loved one, or their dad was just intubated, or their kid got hurt and is going to surgery, or things of that nature. And I didn't think about I got to hide this from management, or I've got to not do this. It was just almost like God just put this peace on me to just be able to put my hand on somebody in prayer. And it would usually be in silence, because I was always like, I'm not like, I work with somebody and she will just like, if she sees you struggling, she will walk across the room and just start praying out loud over you. Like, that's not me. And I think that's a great gift, but I have a gift that I maybe have struggled to call it that, but to connect with people. And I just feel like God is now using that in a way where I've been able to just extend out a little bit in faith and say, would you like some prayer?
I'd like to stop right there, because I think, again, Noah's not up here because he's a champion, like evangelist.
No, my parents are right there. They'll tell you otherwise. My little brother usually comes. He'll tell you all my faults.
But, so many of us are disqualifying ourselves as opposed to looking for the opportunities that God has given us where we're at and what you already do, and the story that's cool about Noah's situation and is that a lot of his evangelism has just happened like through the gifts that God has already given him, as a connector, as like someone who knows how to talk to people. And I think, when we look for these opportunities, we'll be amazed at how God can use somebody like us, right? And even the story that comes to mind is the story of the feeding of the 5,000. That story started because one boy brought his lunch and was willing to offer it to Jesus. And so I just wonder, like that, in a sense, like that's what you've done. You've taken your 5 and 2? I know that I always forget if it's more carbs or less carbs, but anyways.
Carbs.
So I just want to, like, I would want that to be like, just that idea to be multiplied among us. Like, what opportunities has God already given you to just be faithful? You don't have to be a different person than the person that you already are. Like, God has used Noah just being the person that he is, being in medical practice, but being open to care for people. So hopefully that's encouraging to you. Anything else to say about sharing your faith at work? Because I did cut you off.
Yeah, no.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, another aspect of evangelism, and a little plug, we're going to dedicate some babies on Mother's Day. I think I know about all the babies that are in this place, but if you have a baby that you'd like to dedicate on Mother's Day, come see me. We got 3 right now. I love dedicating babies. And why am I talking about baby dedications? Because another aspect of evangelism that we often forget about is our role as parents, And I often say that making babies and raising them to follow Jesus is the best evangelistic activity known to mankind. And so, for I know it's hard, it's not always easy, but how have you seen your role as a father? And we got to baptize Malachi last Sunday, which is super cool.
Yeah, it was.
But how have you guys seen your role as parents being part of the Great Commission call on your life?
Yeah, like Jacqueline, again, we're talking about it, and like when you say it that way, like this is the Great Commission. You're doing it at work. This is the Great Commission. You're doing it at home. Not once has that come to my mind. Like, well, I'm going to be a parent for the Great Commission, or I'm going to go to work, and I don't go to work and say, well, let's see who I can pray for at this time. Like, I do try to use me today aspect, but at home, it's been just like I just want to be a good dad. Like, I just want to be active with my kids. I've been very blessed. Like, I've had amazing mentorship by my parents. I've had, by my uncle as well, Jake's dad, or different people in our church that have done that. And it was just almost like, that training that my parents did, subconsciously, I do think it's subconsciously, has now gone forward. And now that's what I want for my kids. Like, I want to be active in their life as much as I can. I do think that even my work, sometimes I've seen how, precious life is, and I've seen, loss of life in many times. And so I have always like wanted to have that, and I have failed many, many, many times, right? And my kids, as they get older, they will remember much more how much I yell and things of that nature. But one thing that Jacqueline and I have learned is that we complement each other pretty well, like fairly well. And we didn't always. Our first couple of years of marriage was very new. And it, like, as I'm sure, or I hope everyone that has been married would say, like, your first beginning of marriage is just, you're trying to figure out where each other's strengths and weaknesses are at. But, for Jacqueline, one of the best things that I was telling her last night, that she has allowed me to lead. Like, I have not fought her for control, but at the same time, she is like, I was thinking of My Big Fat Greek Wedding, whoever watched that, right? The man is the house, but the woman is the neck. Like, that's Jacqueline. Like, Jacqueline is really good about letting me be the head, but she will be the neck. And what I mean by that is, like, whenever we're about to do something, she goes, well, have you prayed about that? What has God been telling you about that? Or, you're the man of this home. I want you to lead. And so, like, she has definitely equipped me to be the leader. And a lot of times I don't want to be. I would much rather be just tell me, what do you want? What do you want to do, right? Or what do you think we should do? And Jacqueline's got the gift of just discernment, where she's very slow. She's very, like, I don't want to make a rush decision. I want to spend time in the Word or talk about it in school when I went to school when we were married. And Jacqueline was really good about, like, let's write it out. What are the pros and cons? And again, I'm a let's go do it. And she's been very good about, just helping direct my path. So as leading out the Great Commission at home, I think that the biggest thing is I'm just having life. I'm just enjoying it. And I'm feeling very blessed where I'm at. And I have fallen on my face many, 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 many times. But I've had really, really, really good people to lean on or to call me up, and very subconsciously, like, I mean, there's so many of you guys that I would tell you, like, just little conversations that we've had have been, fundamental in how I lead out. Like, like, I love to see and watch dads that have older kids, because, like, that's where I'm going to be at. Like, I watch Andy Plyman. He's really active with his kids in basketball. I want to be really active with my kids in basketball, right? I'll watch Josh Caldwell, man. He is so active with his kids and the way he worships with them. I want that, right? And I look at older people here, like Jason DeWitt, man. Like, he knows the Bible so well, and he's so big on his faith. I want that, like, there's little things like that I just think that we take for granted so often. And I do another things too, like, oh, that's a nice truck. I want that truck, right? But if we can just kind of flip that and put it into our faith, I do think that it's, I don't want to say easy, but it's kind of easy to lead out the Great Commission at home.
Hunger and thirst for righteousness instead of things of the world. Store up our treasures in heaven. Yeah, it's good. So one of the things I wanted to ask you is, this wasn't on the script.
Oh, geez. Okay.
It just feels like a good question, but is, church planting, and we've talked about how it can be hard, but as it relates to parenting, how have you seen church planting and this commitment to a local church impact your parenting? Like, you left a church that had a rad kids program, had a lot to offer, and now you come. When we started this church, we were meeting in our living room. We were just trying to make sure the kids didn't burn the house down while we were praying or whatever, keep one eye open, parents. Anyways, so despite the challenges and what you've given up, how have you seen church planting impact the faith of your kids?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let me think about that. Like, I would say that just as my parents did with me, like, the church was definitely like a nice thing that we had, and it was great connections, and we had a great youth ministry when I was growing up and all these things. But, like, my faith and my devotion to God happened at home first, and church was just like, it was more fun than anything else, and so I want that for my kids as well. Like, their faith and their love for God is starting at our home, and like Malachi being baptized. Like, Malachi, if you guys spend some time with him and he opens up, he's a very deep thinker, and he gets that from his mom. and he has been like wanting to be baptized the last few times. And it's like, well, you're a little young and different things. And this last time at our birthday celebration, when there's baptized, he really wanted to be baptized. And so we started having deeper conversations. And it's like, this kid knows what he's doing. Like, he has a love for God, and he has a devotion to live his life for God and to follow God. And that became much more clear to me. And I do think that, just maybe that's because we started doing this church plant, and because it has definitely put me and Jacqueline into a deeper faith as well. Like, I mean, we talked about it last night. Like, our faith is much deeper now than it was 2 years ago. And it's just because we've been challenged more. In good ways, just like if you go to the gym, right, and things hurt, hey, cool, I'm building muscle, right? Or if I'm dieting and I'm losing weight, wow, okay, cool, like there's progress in it. And so I do think, like, just seeing my son be baptized, like, maybe that's just because we started this church. I don't know if that would have happened at another place, because it was more comfortable, where it was a lot easier to just say, they got their church ministry, we've got this. But I do think, being at home, we have very much emphasis, like, they're going to know the Lord by our actions at home and by spending time with them. Does that answer your question?
Well, I think, what you're saying is just basically a reflection of the idea that parents on mission will raise kids on mission, and it's not so much like even a strategy. It's maybe not even taught, but it's caught.
Yeah.
And I would hope that that's part of what's happening in your home, is that your kids are seeing, wow, mom and dad see the local church as a really valuable thing. Mom and dad have endured some hardships because of the local church. Mom and dad have pressed into God because of this call in their life.
And I don't even know when they'll see that. Like, right now, this is just normal, right? Like, Eli comes, he loves setting up, but like, I think one day, like, I didn't see that with my parents when I'm growing up, but like now it's like, hey, you know what? Yeah. Like, this is just something he loves to do.
Yeah.
We'll feed into it as much as we can.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for taking that impromptu question. So we're coming to the end here, but I think what I wanted to end with is this idea of, all right, so we've got people thinking, they're still with us. No one seems to be asleep, so this is good. But you came with us to the Confluence Leaders Conference, I don't know, 6 weeks ago or whatever. And I know you kind of got fired up. The whole theme of the conference was multiplication, and it was really all about the value of our family of churches to see churches multiplied. And you got excited at that conference. Yeah. You described it as a bit of a mountaintop. But I wanted specifically, for you to maybe relate to people, like how, like they could also get excited, and maybe how you see, okay, so you don't feel necessarily the call of the Lord to be like, plant your own church or be a pastor, at least not at this time, I don't think, unless you're going to share something new with me this morning. But you've done a lot of things. Like I just noticed, like you came home and like all of a sudden your commitment to the setup team like amplified, and you started caring about how the chords were folded up at the end of service a little bit more. And we started labeling things, and I just noticed, so maybe I'm going to talk about this, I don't know, but good. But what I noticed was that you just you amped up your serving. You didn't ask to start preaching. I asked you. You said yes. But you amplified just the ways that you were serving. What would you tell people if you were talking to these folks, like how they could just serve with where they're at and with whatever role God's given them at this time?
Yeah. So like when Jacqueline and I went to the conference, we went because we were asked, and I mean, just like a cool, like Noel said, hey, do you guys think you can go? And with my work and it is really hard for me to get time off in a short, notice. And I told Noel, like, oh man, there's no way we'll be able to go. And I kind of forgot about it. I didn't even ask. And then he sent another text out, hey, do you guys think you'll be able to come? I doubt it, but I text the boss and I just said, hey, is it possible to get these dates off? And like within the same day, which has never happened before, and I don't know if it'll ever happen again. Yeah, you're off. I was like, oh gosh. And Jacqueline's like, well, really? Like we were kind of blown away. And then her mom like just volunteered, oh, I'll stay at your house and watch the kids and the horses and the animals and all this. I was like, okay, like we're going. So I felt like a charge, like, okay, God wants us to be there. Then as we're going there, we're at the airport and we're on the plane, and Jacqueline and I are like, and the days before even, but we didn't know what to expect. We didn't know what it was going to be like. We didn't know what was being called on us. And then from the minute we get there, the first teaching, just going into, like the first teaching, I think, if I remember right, was Pharaoh, and God, uses Moses to go call out and tell Pharaoh to let your people go, but he's gonna say no, right? And so Pharaoh says no, and then Moses gets all upset, right? Oh my goodness, he said no, and God, like, I'm not changing my plan for you, even when there's going to be some hardship with it, right? This has to be done for His will, and I think like that's where I felt like, okay, there's hardship in it, but the plan is still the plan, and I just felt like this charge to come back and like my testimony on that was like I had this calling to disciple more, and I don't mean that by any means like I'm a great leader, follow me, but I just felt like God was telling me this is where I have you right now, is to help disciple and multiply. I not start a church plant, not preach, not do these things, but just utilize where I'm at. So if it's set up, like cool, like I can do setup, and if it's a small group aspect, I can do that. And it was just more of that command of being like happy in your work and be willing to say yes. I did come back with a mountaintop. I had a pastor from our old church, stopped me in the middle of a dinner and just kind of took me aside and said some words over me that it was like I was shaking in my knees, like that, which doesn't happen often. And he just called out a few things that he had seen in my life that meant a lot. It meant a lot for him to say, like. And I remember coming back and talking to Jacqueline, like, oh my gosh, he said these things, and I couldn't stop shaking. That's only happened to me a couple times, and I do feel like that was the Holy Spirit. Another time was when I was prayed over before I went on a missions trip, and it was like this powerful feeling that I had. So I just felt like that again was just confirmation that God was telling me to lean into being used and being willing to say yes. And I think I say no a lot, I mean, I'm a go-getter. I am a yes man by some means, but sometimes it's no, that's too hard, or no, I'm too busy, or I've got a lot going on, which are all true things. I think every one of us here, talking to you guys are all busy and doing things, but I just felt like God was telling me to say yes more and to kind of dig my feet in a little bit deeper. And while there are periods of toughness and hardness with it, again, my faith has grown. My relationship with God has grown. I would tell you my relationship with my wife has gotten better. I do think that my relationship with my kids has gotten better. Just simple things like we say a prayer for the church at night. Not every night, because sometimes I forget and sometimes it's late and I'm tired. But we'll say a prayer for the church, and I do think like those little things. That's a little bit different for me, like to pray for our church, or to pray for Noel, or to pray for Jake, or to pray for the worship team. Like, and I hope that the kids like continue to build that into their life as well. But yeah, that's what I came home with, was like this mission to say yes, to dig my feet in deeper, to be used where I'm at. And I do feel like we have such a cool church. Like I guess one thing I want to share is like, like one of the ways that I've been able to share at work is because of you guys. Like I can't, like, okay, so Andy's looking right at me. Andy, you're a good listener. Noel told me, look for the good listeners. They'll make eye contact with you. They'll shake their head. Those are the ones you want to find. So I keep looking at Andy. You're a good listener. Andy is like an Exeter native, right? Been here, right? And so my kid was in basketball this last year. And so like different people would come in and, if you guys have ever seen me at work, I'm a talker. Shocking, I know. But I hate talking in front of people. And I would be like, oh, yeah, I'm talking to Andy. I went and saw his boys play. Oh, Andy Plyman? Yeah, I know. How do you know him? Oh, we go to church together. Oh, where do you go to church? It's just like that easy, right? And then it's like, okay, cool. Like we get into that. There's like Rhett Watson's another person, right? These Exeter natives. I'm not an Exeter native. Like I don't know a lot of these people outside of the church, because I've been here for 12 years, but I haven't been here. Like I didn't go to high school here. I didn't grow in church here, but you guys are famous. Like a lot of you guys are really, really, really famous, here. And so it's kind of cool. Exeter has that draw where everybody knows everybody. But again, not to toot my horn by any means, but it's easy to tell or to invite people to church because of you guys. Like I've just been able to, like I see a lot of farmers and I'll be like, oh, do you know, so-and-so, right? Or we'll start talking and then we'll bring in, pest control, and I'll start talking about Tyler, right? Oh, how do you know Tyler? You know, oh, did you play sports with him? That's always the question too, with Tyler. But no, he goes to my church, and then it's, what church do you go to? So, yeah, I think it's just having that ability.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, we're glad you've said yes to
Thanks,
Exeter Valley Church, and you guys want to give Noah a round of applause here?